Doing out there this week. This is the In My Footsteps podcast, episode 7. I am Christopher Setterlund coming to you from the vacation destination known as Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I want to welcome you into another episode of history, travel, nostalgia, and fun and entertainment and all that good stuff that I try to pump into these podcasts every time I put them out there. So how's everyone doing? How have you done with your New Year's resolutions? It's got to be tough. 2021 is starting off similar to 2020, so I could understand if people are kind of hesitant with their New Year's resolutions because things just kind of go from bad to worse and get kind of crazy, but hang in there. One resolution I can kind of help you with is fitness in the new year. For anybody who didn't listen to episode 6, I had an interview with fitness trainer and mindful life coach, Koach KO, Kaylin Orr. She gives a lot of great information about fitness in the new year and just taking care of yourself in general. And she is back for episode 7 with a little Q&A to kind of color in the lines of the outline that we created last week. So stay tuned for that a little later in this podcast. I want to say thank you to everyone who has taken the time out to listen to any of these previous episodes. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, which makes me feel great and makes me really enjoy putting these out there, knowing that it's finding an audience and I can just help keep it grow through 2021 and beyond. Like I said, you can find me on all of the major podcast platforms: iTunes, Pandora, Spotify, Stitcher. Recently, I got added to Amazon Music, so now you can go and find the In My Footsteps podcast there. Just look for the logo created by Amy Keller Jump, the great one with New England and Cape Cod and the nice footprint on it. Before we go on and get the podcast started, I wanted to kind of make a special announcement that my 6th book is going to be coming out May 24th of 2021. I just got the announcement, an email from my publisher, the History Press, part of Arcadia Publishing. This book is entitled Iconic Hotels and Resorts of Cape Cod, and I'm really excited about it. Because of COVID, it got kind of delayed. I had finished this book almost a year ago and sent it into the publisher, and obviously things kind of happened and fell apart in the time after that. It's going to feature some of the most popular and most well-known hotels, motels, resorts, inns of Cape Cod. Most of them are still open, but some of them have been lost to history. And I think it's going to be perfect when it's coming out the week before Memorial Day, because hopefully things have started to get closer to normal by then, which means that people can pick up this book and find these places, these resorts, and go there and stay there. And it's like you're being a part of history. As we get closer to the release date, I'll probably go more in depth into the actual process of creating a book as far as writing and then going through the editing and such. But I just wanted to make the announcement now because I just found out about it a couple of days ago. With my last book, number 5, Cape Cod Nights, which was about historic nightlife, bars, and nightclubs, I was able to get on to Channel 5 WCVB's iconic show Chronicle, and we were able to showcase the book and one of the places that I featured in the book, the Beachcomber in Wellfleet. What I'm hoping is for this book now that's coming up that I can get back on Chronicle, because I think the book ties in with not the end of COVID, but it's kind of trending that way hopefully by then. And it's sort of like a way to reopen Cape Cod to vacationers and tourists. And the book will kind of tie in, and we'll be able to go to a few of these iconic hotels and resorts, and it's one hand washes the other. So if anyone from Chronicle is listening to this podcast, just realize that I'll be contacting you folks soon and maybe we can do business again together. But that's coming up in a few months. Right now, we've got episode 7 of the In My Footsteps podcast. It's going to be featuring, like I said, part 2 of the interview with Kaylin Orr, Koach KO. We're going to take a trip up north to the beautiful ski town of Stowe, Vermont. We're going to piggyback on that by going back in the day and talking about old school snow days, what it was like to have a snow day when you were a kid. That's going to be fun. And we're going to do This Week in History, which is going to include the crime of the century in Boston and looking back at the debut of MTV's Unplugged, among other things. So this is episode 7 of the In My Footsteps podcast. I am Christopher Setterland, and come on, let's go take a walk. It's road trip time again. So here we go. It's winter, it's January, it's time for skiing for those that like skiing. So I figured what better place to explore than one of the ski capitals of New England, the beautiful 4-season town of Stowe, Vermont. Stowe is only about an hour south of the Canadian border up there in way northern Vermont, nestled in the Green Mountains. It's known for Mount Mansfield, which is the highest peak in Vermont. It's 4,395 feet tall. Even though it's considered a 4-season place to visit, because it's beautiful in the summer there too, skiing is the main industry when it comes to Stowe and a lot of northern Vermont. Just how big is the ski industry up there? Well, according to Ski Vermont, for the 2017-2018 winter season, the state managed 3.97 million ski days for that season. It's incredible. So you can go and ski Mount Mansfield. You can check out Spruce Peak, ski there as well. The auto road itself, just driving up the mountain, it gives you incredible views of the surrounding Green Mountains. The skiing up in Stowe, that it's so synonymous with the town, that think about it this way. When you hear the state of Vermont, what towns do you think of first? I mean, you might go Montpelier, you might go Burlington, but I think Stowe pops right up there. And the crazy thing about that is that the population of Stowe is just over 4,400 people as of 2018. That puts it not even in the top 10 largest towns in the state, but yet it's so well known for its skiing. However, Stowe is the largest town land-wise, and I think Mount Mansfield and that whole area has a lot to do with it. So if you're going up there to ski, you can stay at such beloved places as the Lodge at Spruce Peak and Smuggler's Notch Resort. Those are always great places to go, even not in the winter. But if you go there not to ski, what else is there to see in Stowe, Vermont? Say if you go in the summer. The first place is Moss Glen Falls. That's about 4 miles north of downtown Stowe. It's about a 3-mile loop that leads you to a waterfall. The fall itself is about 35 feet high, and the trail out there, it's not that difficult. It's easy to moderate, but it's definitely recommended to use it more in the spring and fall rather than trying to hike out there in the wintertime when it's covered in snow. Northern New England especially is known for a lot of covered bridges. If you enjoy covered bridges, there's the Goldbrook Covered Bridge, which is located on Covered Bridge Road right in Stowe. It's also known as the Stowe Hollow Bridge or Emily's Bridge. It was built in 1844 and spans about 50 feet over the aforementioned Goldbrook. I always enjoy covered bridges. There's something that just screams quaint New England. And covered bridges, they're great for photo opportunities, and there's something about them. I can't explain it. Definitely if you're in Stowe, go and check it out and just experience it. Maybe you'll feel differently. Maybe you won't like it. I think you will. If hiking's not your thing, if covered bridges aren't your thing, if skiing is not your thing, well, there's still something else you can check out in Stowe, Vermont. That's the Alchemist Brewery, located at 100 Cottage Club Road. This branch of the brewery was opened in 2016 after the success of the Alchemist Brew Pub opened in Waterbury in 2003. The brewery and visitors center in Stowe, though, it provides, tours, taste tests, and you can obviously buy the beer. That's a great place to check out if you're not there looking to ski, But I think if you go to Stowe, the scenery especially, that's one thing I love, photography and beautiful scenery. And that's something you go there and you get swept up in it. And you may end up skiing. I'm not a big fan of skiing. I would probably go to the mountain and take pictures more than ski, but, that's me. One last thing, if skiing or brewery or anything like that hasn't gotten you in the mood to go to Stowe, you can do a road trip, driving. This is called road trip, so what better way than driving on the historic Route 100 in Vermont? It's the state's longest numbered highway and travels more than 200 miles north to south in the state. It is easily one of the best places to go for fall foliage. It's right up there near the top of any place in New England you want to go to. Stowe, Waterbury, the Mad River Valley, the Route 100 corridor is just one of those bucket list type places. If you haven't driven it, people that live in Massachusetts, they may akin this road to the Mohawk Trail out in the Berkshires. It's similar if you've done that one. They're similar but different. There's nothing like the fall foliage colors with the beautiful homes, the rural areas, the colors, the churches, things like that. It's one of those, you see the photos and you just know, quintessential New England, quintessential Vermont. That's what Stowe is. On top of being one of the country's best ski towns, it's just a place to go and just get engrossed in this beautiful scenery and the culture. For more information and better photos than I can do justice with descriptions, you can go to gostowe.com. They've got a lot of great information. There is also stowe.com and skivermont.com, because that's definitely the main reason people go. As much as I'm trying to sell you on the rest of Stowe, I think the majority of people go in the winter to go skiing, so I'm not going to hide from that fact. If you're plotting out the drive, how far Stowe is from other places in New England, it's about 3 hours north of Boston, about 3.5 hours northwest of Portland, Maine. And if you're coming from the other direction, it's about 3 hours northeast of Albany, New York. That's not far of a drive for people that are going skiing. And if you're going for a trip to see the beautiful scenery, it's really not that bad. It flies by. But join me again for another road trip coming up. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. Hopefully you go check out Stowe. Any time of year is a great time to go for different reasons. But just get out there and enjoy all of what New England and the surrounding areas have to offer. Coming up now is going to be part 2 of my interview with Kaylin Orr, Koach KO. If you were listening last week, she talked a lot about New Year's fitness and her expertise in the fitness and nutrition department. This week, it's more of Q&A. I ask her a few questions that will kind of help as a supplement to what we were doing last time. Hopefully you get a lot of good information out of this. So here, without further ado, is part 2 of my interview with Kaylin Orr, Koach KO. Okay, we are back. This is part 2 of our interview with Koach KO, Kaylin Orr. We're back in the Studio X studio again. This is a little add-on. There's no video with this, but it's another chance for Kaylin to get to share her expertise with you as far as new fitness in the new year goes. So I've just got a couple of questions.
Okay.
These will be good ones. All right, so do you have any exercise recommendations for busy mothers that can't get to the gym? Like, what can they do to get into shape or maintain their fitness if you've got kids and you can't get to the gym?
Okay, so I have a friend, Bree, who incorporates her kids with her exercises. So there are amazing kids workout videos that are, if you do a cardio one on YouTube or anything, get the kids involved. You could do a kids video if you have little kids and do your workout while they're entertained, getting them into fitness early, or you can do yours and have them join in. You see lots of videos online where the kids are learning yoga really young and it's helping them at school, or if you can't do that and maybe there's babies involved, you just have to schedule it. You just have to make it an appointment like any anything else. Make that time. It's from here to here. I'm getting it done no matter what. That's a great way to try to do it too.
Nice, that works. Because I have two of my sisters have younger kids. Sometimes it's hard for them to work out. I thought that might be nice to give them some advice as far as making sure you put the time in for yourself also.
Absolutely.
All right, so changing your diet is tough. What are a couple very basic changes people can make to get on the right track?
Diet is the most hard, okay? It's really a balance of both, but I asked this question in my online program during COVID. Would you rather work out harder so you could eat what you wanted to, or leniently, or could you tailor food more so that you don't have to work out as hard? There are two types of people. I am very clearly the workout harder person because I just love food so much, and it's okay to love food so much. It's the smarter choices that make the biggest difference. So here's my number one biggest. I just told my sister this on the phone the other day. Protein with every single meal. That's going to keep you fuller. It's going to help you digest the bad parts slower. So let's say you have, if you really want a candy bar, you substitute a protein bar in its place. You have the protein slow down the absorption of sugar, so you're able to burn it off before it turns to fat. That's a scientific way to say it. Smarter choices: candy bar, protein bar. Protein bar instead of a meal, maybe not, but protein with every meal. Add nuts to yogurt. You'll be fuller. You'll flow longer. Another thing that I do actually is I do lentil or chickpea noodles instead of pasta or carbs. So I took carbs out of my dinners, not my diet, but my dinners. Okay. I chose one meal that's no carbs. I put in the lentil noodles. They make them, I don't know, Barilla brand, right in the grocery store. They're like $2. They're not in the health food section. And instead of rice, instead of potato, instead of pasta, it's lentil noodles, chickpea noodles. They make black bean noodles. So you're getting the feel of pasta and the taste of pasta, but it's protein, plant protein, and it's amazing. Spice it. Oh yeah, that's another thing. I was able to cut sugar out of my tea with spice. So I added ginger instead of sugar and made it spicy. Same thing with salt in my food, adding spice. Being careful not to add the spice with salt, but spicy stuff, hot stuff, to take salt out of the food makes it taste better.
What spices would you recommend? Because salt is a tough one too.
Oh.
So that's why I'm giving you the floor. What
All right,
would you recommend?
My go-to, and I make soups with it, chicken with it, veggies with it, is cayenne, cumin, and chili powder. And those three, I don't know, there's like a mesquite, and there's a flavor in those. And I think they're Indian spice. You would call that like an Indian dish. Or turmeric. Oh my gosh, so good on chicken. It tastes so good. No salt. Some people that I cook for may say you need a little bit of salt. But you get used to it. If you take it out little by little, you get used to the taste. And then when you can't taste anything that's salty anymore. Remember, small little shifts make a huge difference. Promise. Spice it up.
There you go. Okay, so what are your thoughts on supplements? You know, people, I'm not going to talk about fat burners because those I think are kind of BS. But are there any supplements, vitamins that are beneficial to someone's diet?
Okay, so can I tell a quick story?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I used to be addicted to energy drinks, speed energy drinks like Monster. Do you remember Monster?
I do.
Bob from Mid-Cape hiding my Monster, and everyone just, because I was just running around crazy. So in the fitness terms, when you take fat burners and energy drinks, and just quick touch, you tend to rely on that supplement too much, right? I don't drink enough water. I'm always drinking that. I would get through my classes or my workouts so easily. It's never fazed me. And then I decided to go off of them, and working out was so difficult, so very hard, and to find that drive. But I noticed a change in my body almost instantly because I had to work so hard to facilitate the change in my body and to get the energy up to do what I was doing. So that was a big thing. If you drink energy drinks, think about that. You have to use your own reserve to find the energy. Then you're burning fat and stored energy. As far as supplements, honestly, truthfully, fish oil is one of the best ones for joints and and pain and just overall life. I remember asking a doctor if I could take one supplement. What would it be? They said fish oil. I'm a fan of BCAAs. I tore my shoulder this year, and I took it for muscle recovery. Drink it with water, and there's some with energy in it. I get the one without energy in it, but I'm typically not a supplement person, and only when I had this injury did I turn to something that I felt was going to help me with the tissue and things like that. And whatever it does at the scientific level, I don't know. But I tend to go mostly for whole food, mostly for plant-based stuff, and the nutrients in plant-based things are unmatchable by any supplement.
But you are saying, so the BCAA is branched chain amino acids for anyone that's not sure of those. Yep. There's a brand called Extend. That's something that I had been taking for a long time as a runner.
Yep.
Is there any brand that you...
That's the kind. That's
okay, there you go.
Blue Raspberry Extend. That's what I
have that on my shelf at home, so there you go.
Yep, it's our favorite.
Okay, so going back to the diet, this will be I say one last question, but we'll see how this goes.
Absolutely.
I notice a lot on your social media that you do a lot of cooking, and you've talked about the spices and such. Is there any sort of a go-to recipe of something you make that the people listening might be able to try that would help kind of add it to their diet?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, this is when this whole started. I cook enough food for 10 people when I'm alone, or just me and my boyfriend, honestly, because having the food ready at home in the fridge, number one, I should have mentioned that earlier. Hopefully people listen to both. Having the prep food is like the biggest thing ever. If you're seriously hungry and you need to cook a meal, you're going to reach for something else. So I make this enormous, my Grammy's turkey roasting pan thing of veggies. So get all the veggies you love. I don't care if it's carrots, baked potato, I don't care what it is. There's vitamins in white potato, like thiamine, that you can't get anywhere else. So it's not always bad to cut out. But I do Brussels sprouts and broccoli and cauliflower and carrots and sweet potato and cut it all up, spice it all up, olive oil, and roast it. And every single veggie tastes so good. Like I said, I do the cayenne, cumin, chili powder, or you can do just whatever seasoning doesn't have salt in it. Add whatever to it. Keep that in the fridge. Use it for every single meal. Double veggies. Make some chicken with it. If you're plant-based, do just veggies and rice or whatever you want to do. Have it ready. Then I also make snacks. So I do oatmeal 3 ways. There's overnight oats where you put oatmeal and almond milk and any topping, any protein powder that you want. Layer the top with beautiful fruit and nuts, and you leave it in the fridge overnight. Eat it the next morning or for lunch. I do the same thing with baked oatmeal cups. You make them with just almond milk, baking powder, whatever you want in there. This time I put like some turmeric in there, made it spicy, and then you bake it, and it feels like you're eating a muffin, even though it's just oats and almond milk. It's a brilliant, it's one of the, I got from eatingbirdfood.com, and then also protein balls. So protein balls, you remember, we did the Kick for a Cause at Mid-Cape, and I made them, I think, 12 different ways. You pick oats. You get a sticky. You can do Nutella, peanut butter, almond butter, cashew butter, sunflower butter, whatever you want. Mix in whatever you want. Chocolate protein powder, peppermint, nuts, seeds, honey. You just roll them into a ball into a consistency that you like. Literally, that's the recipe. Have it for snacks. Keep snacks in your car that are healthy. Make sure they have protein in them so you're not just eating carbs and sugar. And then this is the main one right here. Ready? Soups. It's soup season right now. Okay. Bone broth, chicken. You don't have to add chicken. All the veggies in the world that you want. The lentil noodles and chickpea noodles translate great in those soups too. I measured out my soup last year, and it had 80 grams of protein per serving.
Man,
and
there
tons
you
of
go.
veggies. And those meals powered me through 5 or 6 classes on the blacktop pavement this summer. No problem.
No kidding. So see, she's giving you a lot of stuff right there. And obviously, do you have are any of these recipes written down, or is it kind of like you just know what to do?
I mean, from growing up from my mom, I just
I was more.
But on my Instagram, I do write a lot of the things out on the Koach KO 2 underscores. Always constantly adding. Oh, let me add one more. This is the best thing. Anyone's listening, if you make it, let us know. It's called a banana pancake. But guess what? It's just 2 eggs and 1 banana. And it looks like an omelet, and when I put peanut butter on it, people are so grossed out. But you just mash the banana, add 2 eggs, fry it, maybe a little bit of olive oil, tiny bit, and then put peanut butter on it. You will thank me. You will find me on social media like, oh my God, the banana pancake. No sugar, no flour, no nothing.
See that? There you go. There's a lot of recipes right there.
Yeah.
Things that'll help you change your diet, things that'll help me change my diet. Mm-hmm. And then you can, after you're done changing your diet, come and find Kaylin, Koach KO, and work on the rest. It's all one hand washes the other.
That's right.
Diet and fitness.
That's right. And water, lots of water.
See,
you think you're hungry, but you're just thirsty.
See that? Remember that. Thank you so much for being a part of the In My Footsteps podcast. Go find Kaylin on social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. And if you have any questions about any of the recipes, you can shoot me an email, and I will shoot her an email, and we will see what we can come up with.
Team!
But thank you again.
Thanks, guys!
Thank you so much to Kaylin Orr, Koach KO, for giving us some of her time to share some fitness and nutrition expertise. There is a lot to unpack with that interview and the previous one. So if you have any questions, if anything kind of flew by, because Kaylin had a lot of information to share, if anything didn't make sense, shoot me an email, christophersutherland@gmail.com, and we will try to sort it out for you. And also give me some feedback on what you thought of this interview segment. Granted, we were in a studio, so there was some echo on my Audacity software that I use to edit this podcast. I tried my best to reduce a lot of it. But besides that, if you enjoyed the interview, I'm going to be trying to do more of these every so often. Let me know what you thought of it, if there's anyone you'd like to hear me interview, within reason. But thank you again to Kaylin Orr for giving us some of her time on the In My Footsteps podcast. If you're looking to get fit in the new year, and after hearing part 1 and part 2 of the interviews with Kaylin Orr, and you want to train with her, there's a lot of places you can do that, as we talked about. She trains at Studio X in Hyannis. She also trains at Forte Fitness, also in Hyannis. Remember, she does in-home training. If you want to contact her about that, she has pages on Facebook. She's got Instagram, which is the Koach KO with 2 underscores. She also has Kaylin Orr Fitness on YouTube. I picked her to discuss New Year's fitness because I believe in her skill and her ability to meet everyone where they are and get the best out of them. Whatever it is you need, she can give. So check out her videos, check out her photos, check out all of her advice, her recipes. If you're looking for overall fitness, weight loss, muscle gain, nutrition, dietary changes, all of that, Koach KO Kaylin Orr is your solution. So find her on all of those platforms. Find her at Studio X. Find her at Forte Fitness. It's time now to go way back in the day. This is kind of my reminiscing / retro / nostalgia segment of the podcast. I'm going to find some stuff from my childhood, young adulthood to share and see if any of you, especially the ones that are my age, will probably be able to relate. And then the younger generation can laugh at some of the stuff that I talk about. So it's January, it's winter time, so I figured what better thing to talk about than old school snow days. Growing up in New England on Cape Cod in the 1980s, we got a lot of snow days. Surprisingly, though, not as many as you might think, because a lot of the times they would make us go to school even if we had 3 or 4 inches of snow on the ground, because we always feared you got a certain amount of snow days, and if you go past them, then you've got to go to school later into the summer, the end of June. So it was almost like we'd rather not get a snow day than, have to go to school until the end of June. The anticipation for the snow days was always incredible. You knew there was a chance, but you couldn't risk staying up later than you would for a school day, because then if you had to get up and actually go to school and get up at 6 or 7 a.m. with no sleep, that was the worst. You kind of hedged your bets. You go to sleep early, you wake up early, and then you would put on the radio and listen. And every maybe 15 minutes on the radio, they would announce new schools that had school canceled. And it was always the worst if your school still had school, but the rest of the area didn't. That was not fair. But if school got canceled, then it was off to the races. You immediately get on your snow gear. If you were young enough, you had the snow suits that were you basically stepped into and zipped up the front with the little hood. Make sure you're all bundled up. And usually I'm one of 5 kids, and I'm the oldest of the 5. So we would just kind of wander out into the yard at first and just kind of throw snow, dive in the snow. When it was the late 80s, so I would have been 11, 12 years old, it was a little more difficult to bring out 5 kids and go to the golf course. We were lucky enough that we grew up quarter of a mile walk at most from a golf course. It was right behind our house. But if there's 5 of us kids and the oldest is me and I'm 11 and the youngest is 4, you don't really want to walk to the golf course I have twin sisters, the youngest, so you wouldn't want to walk to the golf course with a pair of 4-year-olds, so we would drive. Back then we had the classic Aerostar minivan, this blue one with blue and kind of silver, and all of us kids would pile into it, and you'd have the classic plastic sleds. They're the cheap ones, because what parent's going to buy super expensive sleds for kids to ruin? And we would get driven to the golf course, and you'd spend hours there sledding down the hills. You'd find the furthest hill that you could and slide down it as much as you could until you were ready to pass out, or until your fingers went numb, and feet. That happened quite a bit. I just remember at the golf course being a line of minivans with all the different parents bringing their kids there to tire them out because who in the world, as a parent would want to have all their kids at home inside on a snow day? You want to tire them out, and so then they fall asleep when they get home. As I got older, I would walk to the golf course and go sledding just with friends. Those were the days we'd explore, go deep into the golf course, find hidden secret hills, ones that weren't even hills, that would have stumps and rocks there, and you just slide down and just bust your sled or bust your butt. Those were the times we ended up getting the nice inner tubes later on. They would deflate. Sometimes you'd have to pump them up in the cold. But you take those and you could get some serious speed going down especially the driving ranges at the golf courses. Those were pretty wide open. Of course, with the freedom of getting to walk to the golf course with your friends as you grew up, also came the problem of having to actually shovel the driveway. That was always an advantage, for all the headaches and trouble that the 5 of us kids caused my mother. I think she had the advantage of being able to tell all of us, get out there and shovel the driveway so that she didn't have to do it. I remember, I think it was 1987, January 87, we had a pretty bad storm on Cape Cod, and I swear we had 4 or 5 straight days off from school. For a while, we had no power, and we had a fireplace, and I can remember either drying clothes there with the little screen that you'd put in front of the fireplace, and even heating up coffee. I mean, I didn't drink it. I was 10 years old. I don't remember a lot of specific snow days. I just remember the overall feelings. They all kind of played out the same. Unless it was a super duper blizzard, you were outside in the snow almost all day. And this was back then where you just could leave the house. Your parents would tell you, come back whenever, 2 hours, 3 hours, come back when the street lights are on. And they didn't have to worry about you. It was like having a babysitter without having a babysitter. I never went skiing, but as I got into high school, my sledding activities kind of got a little different. We would do night sledding. I remember my friends, John and Barry, we would go to the golf course at night and go sledding, and it was more fun, extreme, because you couldn't see where you were going. We even got to one point where we went sledding down the hilly entranceway to this golf course, which was a lot of fun. I mean, unless you crash into the side. We did that once. I used to have a video camera in high school, and I videotaped us doing night sledding once, and I do remember carrying the camera as I sledded down the street and crashing into a sign. I didn't destroy the camera, but it looks pretty good. After I got my driver's license, I was shocked that my mother would sometimes allow me to drive the car in the snowstorms, after the snowstorms. I mean, we had this old blue, I think it was an Oldsmobile station wagon And I don't think, not that my mother didn't care if I wrecked it, but it was, I think she had some trust that I wouldn't destroy it. I remember specifically this one time I had to pick her up late from work. We're talking 11 o'clock at night, and it was in a snowstorm, and she still got called into work. My sister Lindsay, who's the fourth out of us 5 kids, she came with me, and what a mistake that was for her. So I ended up not crashing the car, but hitting a snowbank. Rather than trying to have her, I think she was 11 years old, get out and push the car, I got out and pushed the car, and I was explaining to her how to drive. And I'll never forget, I pushed the car, we got out of the snowbank, and she is just not peeling out down the street, but I'm having to chase my 11-year-old sister driving the car in the snow, running after. I mean, she eventually got the brakes on, but that's another one of those sort of snow day memories, because I know I didn't have school, but that was an adventure all in itself. Any snow day would end with coming in with your soaking wet clothes, leave your boots at the door. My mother hated that. We would just come, all of us, flying into the kitchen, the tiled floor just soaked with snow and dirt. She would have to have all of us throw our clothes, especially the boots, right at the door. Everything else, kind of leave them there. She's like, I'll handle it, just leave them. And then we had hot chocolate, of course, marshmallows in that. And then we'd be wiped out. We'd veg out in front of the TV, assuming we had power, and sometimes pray that we had no school the next day, which quite often, if you had one day off, you would have another one if it was a big enough storm. Sledding on the golf course, night sledding, hot chocolate, all that good stuff. That's just what I think of when I think of the old school snow days. Like I said, I was too young to remember the blizzard of 78. I was probably 3 months old. For the most part, I've been lucky to have these storms where they don't cause tons of damage, but we were able to kind of go and enjoy ourselves and have fun. So it's always positive memories. Now, snow is not my favorite thing. Going out and having to shovel is the only thing that is similar to those old days. You rarely get days off from work. So it's usually just get up, shovel snow, and go to work. There's no sledding. I don't have kids, so there's no sledding. I guess I could make hot chocolate. So what are your memories of old school snow days? I'm sure it's different if you grew up in the city. You might go and skate at the skating rink if they have one of those outdoors. But if you grew up like I did on Cape Cod and in New England, in the less populated areas, it was sledding on the golf course or just walking around the snowy neighborhood and just enjoying the scenery and having some adventures. But I hope I brought back some memories going back in the day of the old school snow days. It's time once again for This Week in History. This is where I go over 4 events that happened this week in the past, local, national, world, and some fun pop culture. So let's dive right into it. This Week in History, 71 years ago, on January 17th, 1950, the crime of the century happened in the North End of Boston. This crime was the robbery in the North End at 165 Prince Street, which is actually less than a quarter mile from the Great Molasses Flood that I spoke about on last week's podcast, ironically, really close by. So the nuts and bolts of it are at 7:30 p.m., a group of between 5 and 7 masked and armed robbers robbed this Brinks building. All of the robbers had these weird sort of Halloween masks on, and the employees were bound and gagged with tape on the floor. It was seen as kind of odd that they did very little talking and moved with such precision. It was like they had rehearsed this for months before actually going on to do it. So when they were looting the place, a buzzer went off that signified that someone wanted to get into the vault, and it was a garage attendant, and that kind of set things off. The garage attendant was lucky, though, because he ended up not coming in, and 2 of the robbers went to apprehend him, so he actually got away. In the end, the masked robbers got away with cash and checks and more that totaled about $30 million when adjusted for inflation. There was a $100,000 reward offered for any info, and there were hundreds of dead ends in trying to apprehend any of these robbers. The investigation lasted years, and actually it came up about 5 days before the statute of limitations was going to run out in January 1956. 5 members of the gang were arrested, with 3 more being arrested within the next few months. The 8 received life sentences in prison for their actions in the robbery, with all but 1 being paroled in 1971. And not surprisingly, only $58,000 of the money that was taken in the robbery was ever recovered. If you want to learn more about that robbery, there was a book written called The Men Who Robbed Brinks, released in 1961. It was written by Bob Considine, and he actually had help from a former gang member, Joseph Specs O'Keefe. This week in history, 212 years ago, January 19th, 1809, Edgar Allan Poe was born in Boston. Poe was a giant in the American literary scene. He was mostly known for his poetry and short stories. That's kind of how he got started. His first book was an anonymous collection called Tamerlane and Other Poems that he released in 1827. For those that might not be familiar with Edgar Allan Poe, his most famous works are Fall of the House of Usher from 1839, The Telltale Heart from 1843, and perhaps his most famous work, The Raven, from 1845. He was one of the first people to try to make a full-time living as a writer, and he was easily one of the most influential writers of the 19th century, and his contributions as far as mystery and horror still stand tall today. Any talk about Poe's life has to include his mysterious death. So he died in Baltimore on October 7th, 1849, at the age of 40. Theories about how he died have been disputed for forever. He was said to be delirious when he was found, basically laying in the gutter, and he was unable to ever explain what had happened to him when he died a few days after he was found. People say it's anything from murder to suicide, alcohol poisoning, to even crazy things like rabies or something called cooping, which was a form of voter fraud where you'd be grabbed off the street and given a ton of alcohol so that you couldn't think straight, and then you were forced to vote for a certain candidate in an election. And that's another theory as to what might have happened to Poe. Regardless of how he died, his works still stand the test of time today, and Edgar Allan Poe was born 212 years ago this week in history. This week in history, 248 years ago, January 17th, 1773, Captain James Cook became the first person to sail into the Antarctic Circle. In July 1772, Cook departed Great Britain aboard the HMS Resolution. This was his second journey. On his first journey, he had mapped out much of New Zealand and Australia, and he was commissioned to do this second journey not too long after he returned from the first. Cook became the person to travel furthest south of anyone in history, although he did not actually reach the mainland of Antarctica. It was on the 17th of January that he penetrated the Antarctic Circle. On this journey, he would actually cross into the circle 3 times total. The third time that he crossed in was the furthest south, but he ended up having to turn the ship back due to the weather and the sea ice. The journey was a success, and when he returned home to Britain in 1775, he was seen again as a conquering hero and was actually commissioned for a third exploratory trip. This one was not as lucky, though. This time, Cook went all the way out to Hawaii, and a cutter was stolen from one of his ships. In 1779, this was when this journey took place. Cook was murdered while attempting to kidnap Hawaii's monarch, Kalaniʻopuʻu. So the third voyage of Captain James Cook did not go as well. But this week in history, January 17th, 1773, Cook became the first man to sail into the Antarctic Circle. In pop culture, this week in history, 31 years ago, on January 21st, 1990, MTV's Unplugged show debuted. The show was recorded a couple of months earlier, but made its debut on this day on the network. It wasn't even called MTV Unplugged at the time. The band Squeeze was the main attraction of this one. If you don't know them, they've got a song Tempted and another Pulling Muscles from a Shell. If you listen to them, they're pretty good. It's incredible to think of the bands and the artists that came after, that they were the kind of the first to headline Unplugged. Over the years, bands like Kiss, Rod Stewart, Eric Clapton, Paul McCartney, 10,000 Maniacs, Jay-Z, and more have graced the stage of MTV Unplugged. But for me, as a child of the 80s, teenager of the 90s, being defined by grunge music as much as I was growing up, for me it was those bands when they played MTV Unplugged. Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and for me especially Nirvana. That's the band that kind of defined me. I remember the Nirvana show in October 1993, and only after Kurt Cobain died in April 94, and then watching that show back, that I realized all the kind of funeral imagery of the set. The Pearl Jam show was actually the one that was first on MTV Unplugged, and I always got a kick out of it because I don't know if they were told, or Eddie Vedder was told, not to swear in any of the songs. There's a couple that have swears, especially from 10. When he does the song Porch, and it starts off with a swear, I won't say it. It's like he made this noise like he was swallowing it so he wouldn't say it. And then he scribbles on his arm with this marker. He writes pro-choice on his arm, or at least that's what he said he wrote. You couldn't really tell at the time. He just looked like he was insane, scribbling on himself. But that was kind of the feel of grunge. It was different. It was counterculture. I'll get way more into grunge as we go into this podcast. And there was also Alice in Chains, which I really enjoyed their set. That was one of their last shows, maybe their last show they ever did, when that one came out on Unplugged. And I'll always remember Jerry Cantrell, the guitarist, had something scribbled on his guitar, and it said, "Friends don't let friends get haircuts." And it was because Metallica was sitting in the front row, and this was when they had all gotten the haircuts and got rid of their long hair. Only after the fact that I find that out. MTV Unplugged would kind of give way to a cousin on VH1, the VH1 Storytellers. They're very similar. It's a way to kind of cut through the noise and just hear what the music was about. And that's why with bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Alice in Chains that were seen as counterculture and loud alternative grunge, and you strip all that away and you see that they're super talented musicians, and that was kind of the big takeaway. Other ones like Clapton and Rod Stewart and Paul McCartney, they were all established already, so they really didn't need it. For these grunge bands, it really helped to establish them as more than just screaming, yelling, feedback. It all started this week in history 31 years ago with the premiere of MTV Unplugged. And that's going to do it for this week in history. We'll have another one coming up next week. Hopefully you're enjoying these. As always, I don't gloss over these. I try to fit them in a time frame to make this a manageable segment and a manageable podcast. Obviously, there's more stuff that you can learn about all of these. There's research that I did. The FBI website can tell you all about the Brinks robbery. Edgar Allan Poe has a website that has a huge, long biography, things like that. But definitely go out of your way to check out the Unplugged and learn as much as you can about history. It's my favorite subject, and I think that projects a little bit here. But I'll be back next week for more This Week in History. And that's going to do it for episode 7 of the In My Footsteps podcast. Thank you again to all of you who have listened to any of these episodes. I hope that you've enjoyed them, and if you've enjoyed them, you've spread the word. That's the best way to get this to grow, is just tell a friend who tells a friend, and then we go from there. Be sure to go and subscribe on YouTube. I do companion video pieces for each episode where I take one of these segments and kind of put photos and animations to them. Kind of a companion piece, cross-promoting. But go over and subscribe on YouTube. I do that for each episode. I had one for the last episode 6 with my interview with Kaylin Orr. You can still go check that out too. Go and find me on Facebook. I have the In My Footsteps podcast page. Instagram, I have 2 accounts. The personal one that's got my photos And I've got a podcast one, In My Footsteps podcast, that's more obviously podcast related. Twitter, my handle is Chris Setterland. So you can go find me on all those social medias. I also have my own personal website, ChristopherSetterland.com. That's where you can find all 5 of my books that are out now. Book 6 will be out, as I said at the top of the podcast, May 24th. If you don't want to go to my site, you can always go to Amazon. You can also go to historypress.com or schiffer.com and find them there. If you're looking for podcast merch, I don't have much. I have a bumper sticker and a keychain. I have a Zazzle store, zazzle.com, Cape Cod Living. Go there. I've got those things. I have some photos that are kind of made into postcards that are pretty neat. I also have a calendar for 2021, Massachusetts After Dark. A little funny side note is I printed these calendars out and sent them to some friends and family. And the funny thing is that when I designed the calendar, I did not put my name on it. So people were getting this calendar, and although they knew it was from me, there was no proof it was from me. And my friend Barry actually said that to me. He said, next time you should probably put your name on it. And I couldn't believe it because when I made the calendars last year for 2020, I did the same thing at first. Didn't put my name on it. I like my photos. I don't want to be anonymous when I put these together. But yes, I have a calendar up on the Zazzle store and some other merchandise on there. Just if you're interested, it's my podcast. I got to plug all my stuff all at once. Check out my In My Footsteps blog. That's at blogger.com. I've been doing that for 10 years now. Travel articles, lifestyle articles, those are more recent. But go and check those out. Those are pretty good too. For those that are interested in Cape Cod, New England history, I've got a lot of that lesser known stuff. I find it fun to go online and find the old newspaper archives. I don't know if anyone's ever tried those. Boston Globe has a great one through the Boston Public Library. It's free if you get a library card. And there's other ones on Cape Cod, the Barnstable Patriot, Falmouth Enterprise, Provincetown Advocate. They've all got online newspaper archives, and I'm addicted to those. So this was my second of 3 straight weeks of doing a podcast, trying to see how that goes as far as workload. So tune in next week when we'll have another new episode of the podcast, episode 8, where we will take a look back at Cape Cod's own television station, TV 58. For any children of the 80s, you might remember that. We'll take a road trip up to the beautiful town of Lincoln, New Hampshire. I'll go back in the day for real this time and look at the music of 1991 and how that affected and defined who I was and who a lot of people of my generation are. And we'll do another episode of This Week in History, which, among other things, will include the Beatles' legendary last performance ever on the rooftop of their studio. Everybody stay safe out there. Remember, the COVID pandemic is not over. We're hopefully getting close to getting over that hump with all the vaccines hopefully coming to everyone within the next few months. But I just had a close call just in the last week or so where a friend had someone that he worked with had the virus. And so because of that contact tracing, I had to take a full week off from working both jobs that I do and basically was on lockdown for 99% of the time of this past week. And it's scary because you never know. You may be asymptomatic. The thing is, just be patient. Hopefully, God knows we've been dealing with this for almost a year, and I'm hoping that we're almost done. I don't care as much about going to the bars or going to sporting events. My main thing is I just want to be able to visit my family and not worry about this pandemic. That's the thing that I've realized that I've missed the most, is just going to see my mother, my sisters, my brother, my nieces and nephews, my grandmother at the retirement home she's at. So everybody just hang in there. We've got to be getting close. Until then, I'll be here continuing to do these podcasts as a distraction for myself and hopefully a distraction and some entertainment for all of you out there. Thank you again so much to all of you that have listened, that have shared it, that have sent me positive feedback. I really do appreciate it. But remember, on this road of life, don't follow in anyone's footsteps. Create your own path and enjoy every moment you can on this journey. I'll talk to you again soon. Take care, everyone.